I'm here to help women reset and rewild, to embrace and prioritize the pauses in order to reclaim their peace and power. I'm Dr. Michelle Paris, director of the Poppy Clinic and founder and CEO of the Wild Collective. As a disruptor, naturopathic doctor, wife, and mama, I've created a global movement and sacred space for women to rise together. Here, you'll break through limitations, romanticize your life, and unlock the magic of your divine feminine power. My life's work is rooted in community, lifting women into their most powerful, authentic selves, while empowering clinicians to elevate their practices with a transformational, community-driven model. I lead a thriving, passion-fueled business and naturopathic practice brimming with abundance, where I can guide women to invigorate their lives through sisterhood and elevate healthcare with a cutting-edge transformational approach. I've witnessed firsthand in my practice how this model sparks consistent health transformation, creates flourishing communities, and brings profitable success. You can have it all, a life filled with abundance, contagious joy, and untethered potential. So pull up a seat. It's time to pour into yourself and tap into your intuition and design a life that's wild, free, and uniquely yours. And I'm going to show you how. This is Wild Medicine.
Hello and welcome back to the Wild Medicine Podcast. I am Dr. Tara Rawana, and I'm here today with a solo podcast. And I'm really excited to dive into this topic. So as you know, Michelle and I together, we run our Shed Metabolic Weight Loss program here at the Poppy Clinic. And in addition to that, I also do a lot of work around puberty with moms and daughters. And this conversation today is going to be in that vein. So I want to today talk about social media and social media for tweens and teens and how we can really help them to develop a healthy, productive relationship with their devices. So I've been speaking in public schools, so elementary schools and high schools, about mental health and social media for the last, I think probably 4.5 years or so now. And initially, when we first got started teaching in schools, we were talking a lot about mental health. So talking to students about mental health, talking to parents about how they could support their kids with mental health. And as we were having a lot of these conversations, schools really, they were making the connection between social media devices and mental health. And they were seeing it as something that was a big contributor to youth anxiety, depression, bullying, all of those pieces. And they really wanted us to dive into this topic and help educate students and parents on this relationship. And so that's mostly what I've been speaking about in schools, especially the last couple years. It's really been social media heavy. And again, for good reason, right? These principals and teachers and superintendents, they're seeing these things on a day-to-day basis. They're seeing how tech and this, feeling of addiction that so many kids have to their devices is really impacting students on a day-to-day basis. And so I spent a lot of time having these conversations, thinking about these things, and I wanted to bring some of that education to you all. And I'm also hosting a mom and daughter social media safety workshop next month in September. We'll have all the details in the show notes, and I'll share a little bit more about that at the end. But if you are in that phase of life, if your daughter is still, about to join social media, if she's asking about it or if she's a new user, then that's really who the workshop is geared towards. You'll come with your daughter, so it'll be really interactive. Again, I'll speak to that a bit more towards the end, but I'm really excited to be offering that and to just have these conversations that I get to have so much and that I know are really impactful for families. So right off the bat, social media, as you probably know, is not a bad thing, right? And even for kids, it's not necessarily a bad thing. And the thing about social media and about devices and screens in general is that they are going to be part of your child's life for the rest of their life. We live in a really digital age, right? There's a very good chance that some aspect of what they do in the future Whether that's for school or for work, they're going to have some of these skills. They're going to have to know how to be savvy online users. It's actually at this point, I think it's pretty much a life skill to be able to navigate our devices and the internet well. But with that, of course, comes a lot of challenges, especially for kids, especially for new users who are still developing, right? Their brain is still undergoing so much development. It's harder for them to think through the risks and the permanence of what we put online. And I want to share some of the research as well, because I think it's really fascinating when we can ground a lot of these conversations in research. We can start to notice who's most at risk, and we can get ahead. We can be proactive and preventative when it comes to helping kids develop these healthy relationships. And so research shows that teenagers who spend 3 to 5 or more hours a day on social media, they are actually at double the risk of developing anxiety and or depression. And then some studies also found severe mental distress for kids who were using social media for 7 hours or more. Okay, so 3 to 5 hours, to summarize that, 3 to 5 hours, double the risks of anxiety and depression, and more than 7 hours a day, intense mental distress. And those numbers to you, they might sound high, but I've talked to a lot of teenagers in schools. Even in my private practice, I work with a lot of teenagers, and I can tell you that kids are spending a lot of time on their devices. On average, what we see in the research is that on average, teenagers spend 4.8 hours a day on social media apps. So right around 5 hours a day on their devices. So that's a lot of time. That's a lot of hours, right? And I think, sometimes what I like to think about is the ripple effects of this. And I have, especially in my private practice, when we're really diving into all of the aspects of health for these tweens or teens, that's when we can really start to see the ripple effects of kids spending so much time on social media and on their devices. So I see 2 big ripple effects here. And the first is the impact on sleep. And it's huge. The impact is huge. So many teenagers are going to bed at 2 a.m., 3 a.m., even later on school nights because they are on their devices. They're Snapchatting their friends. They're in the group chats. They're scrolling on TikTok. I hear this all the time. And so often, if we're thinking about energy levels in kids, if they're falling asleep in class or they're having a really hard time paying attention or concentrating, or if they're having mood swings or anxiety, we have to look at what might be contributing to that. And sleep, if they're not sleeping, if they are on their devices all night long, of course, we are going to see those effects. Sleeplessness has so many effects when it comes to mood, when it comes to energy, when it comes to all of those pieces. And kids are sleeping a lot less. Teenagers are sleeping less because of their devices. And I'll chat through later in this podcast about some of the rules that I think are really important when we're giving kids access to devices and social media. And I think not having their device in their bedroom overnight is one of the most important rules that I share with families. I think it is absolutely key. There is no reason for a teenager to need to be able to access their device at 2 a.m. No reason at all. And I think that, again, I'll talk about all the rules or a handful of rules to consider for your family, but that can really help to ensure that kids are actually sleeping properly. And then another ripple effect of spending 5 hours a day on social media is, I see this again a lot with my tween and teen patients in my private practice, is lack of exercise. Right? Think about all the things that kids are not doing if they're spending that much time on their devices, in addition to being at school and, sports and whatever else they have going on in their life. That doesn't leave them with too much extra time. And exercise is one of the things that is suffering. Kids are a lot more resistant to go outside and play and run around and get involved in sports in favor of being on their devices and feeling like they are connecting with their peers, with their friends, because they're chatting with them. But, while there are benefits to that, right, and still feeling like they're part of a community and part of, something bigger than themselves, they are missing out on a lot of those other aspects of of meeting up with friends, of going to do fun things, of the bike rides and the soccer games and all of those things. That's a really important piece of this as well. And, lack of exercise, often I do see that reflected in blood work for kids, where, and I've talked about this on a past episode too, where we're seeing higher levels of elevated blood sugar and dysregulated lipid panels, that's triglycerides and cholesterol for kids, right? So big ripple effects that I really wanted to highlight just so that we can really have a good conversation about the risks and what we're giving up in favor of these devices. And these are really important things to think through when you're giving your child access to devices. And I have a lot to say about that because sometimes parents think that it's a certain age. Well, when my kid is 13 or turns 12 or whatever it is, that's when they should get social media. That's when they should get access. And I really push back against that. I think that it should be actually less about her age or his age and more about whether or not your child has the skills to handle the responsibility of social media. What social media will do is it'll magnify their current maturity level. And if they don't have the skills, if they don't have the self-regulation skills, then that is only going to be made worse when they are on social media. And even the maturity to understand the permanence of what they put on the internet. We know there was a report that found that 55% of employers chose not to hire somebody because of what they saw on that candidate's social media. So this is something that schools are looking at, right? Universities, colleges, employers. It's really easy to learn a lot about someone now by just searching their name, right? A lot comes up, and what comes up matters. It can, again, influence whether or not they get into schools, whether or not they get a job that they really want. And for a lot of 10-year-olds, 12-year-olds, it's really hard to understand that. They don't have that understanding of permanence just yet. And so that's another thing to think through.
This episode is brought to you by the Wild Collective. If you are ready for something innovative, something truly transformational, you are wanting to build a beautiful life and thriving health and vibrant energy, and you're not sure how to build that in, you might want to consider something as incredible as the Wild Collective. The Wild Collective is our women's health initiative. It is a closed community of like-minded individuals. It is where sisterhood meets self-care. There's 10 modules of fundamental women's health, all the evidence-based information that you need, the testing, the handouts, the assessment, how to advocate for yourself in the wellness space. Also, what natural and integrative approaches you can consider for any age and stage in life. And being that it is part of a community, you also get this beautiful experience of meaningful connection, conversations that matter, and truly up-leveling your life. So if you are ready to take on something totally transformative and fun, then please go check us out at the Wild Collective. So that's the-wild-collective.com. Get on the wait list, and we will see you in one of our Wild Circles very soon.
Often the consequences of making mistakes on the internet are significant, right? They're long-lasting mistakes. They're mistakes that could have a lot of ripple effects. And that's an important piece of all of this, is knowing that your child will make mistakes on social media. We all make mistakes, right? When we're learning, we teach kids that. We all make mistakes. It's okay to make mistakes. And so mistakes will be made online, on social media, on their devices. And we have to make sure that they understand that those mistakes may have big, semi-permanent consequences. And we also want to be sure, and this speaks again to that maturity, is when your child makes a mistake, do they come to you? Do you have that? Have you built that relationship with your child where if they make a mistake, let's say in the real world, if they make a mistake, do they come to you? Do they ask for support? Do they ask for guidance? Or are they a kid that tends to hide things, that tends to bury things inside? We want to make sure that we are working towards them being able to be open and honest about mistakes with you so that you can help them navigate the mistakes that they make online. And speaking of that relationship and coming to you, another thing that I really like to talk to parents about, I've had this conversation in schools quite a bit, is the way that we are modeling our relationship to devices with kids. So one question that I often ask parents is, if your child mimicked your habits or your relationship that you have with your device, 100%, if they had the exact same relationship, same habits, same everything, how would you feel about that? And a lot of parents, they go, ooh, I wouldn't really like that, right? So it's just a moment of self-reflection without judgment. But when your child is talking to you, are you on your phone? Right? At a red light, are you glancing down? Are you scrolling through something? Right? Your kids see that, and that's how they're learning. And, if we want to teach our kids about time limits and about the fact that devices are not for all the time, they're for certain times or whatever that messaging is at home, it is important that you're modeling that within reason, of course. I'm sure for so many of us, right? Work doesn't end at 5 or 6 p.m. anymore. We're checking emails in the evening. We're responding to things. That is, for a lot of people, the reality of life. But the time that you are spending with your kids, are you present? Are you focused on them, or is your device in the way? Right? So again, no blame, no shame, but just a moment to actually think through that and reflect on that. And, back to that readiness and it not so much being an age, but being a stage, being a level of maturity. Something else that was found in the research is that 46% of adolescents say that social media makes them feel worse about their body image. And this is for me, this is a really big piece of the puzzle, because once you give your kids access to TikTok, to Instagram, to Snapchat, to whatever it is, you cannot really control what it is that they see. There's a lot of adult content on these apps. We can pair accounts, we can put parental controls and filters on things, but things slip through. And there's a lot of adult content. There's content that is, even if it's not using profanity or things like that, there are things that kids just don't yet understand, that are not yet relevant to them, that may make them feel worse about the way that they look or what they have or don't have. And that's something that we have to be mindful of. We have to make sure that we're having conversations about these things, about body image, about health and nutrition, so that they feel really grounded at home. And this is part of, a larger conversation that we see all over the research when it comes to mental health outcomes, is that kids really just want to feel like they belong. That is what they are searching. And honestly, it's what we're all searching for, right? We all want to feel like we are important, like we're part of something bigger than ourselves, that we're part of a community, part of a greater good. And kids are looking for that too. And so the more that we can create that in our own homes, families, communities, the better. The better off kids are, the better off we all are, really. But what we see in the research is that when kids don't feel like they have that sense of community or sense of belongingness within their community, within their family, within their school, whatever it is, they are more vulnerable to turn to social media to fill that void, to achieve that sense of connection. And sometimes, maybe more like often, that's not always a great idea on social media. We see a lot of predatory behavior, unfortunately, on social media. A lot of adults pretending to be children, to talk to children. In some ways, it's a very dark space. And so the more that we can help kids have that sense of belongingness at home before we give them access to social media, we know the better off they will be. And Another piece of this too that I think is really important when we're thinking about whether or not to give kids access to social media is, why do they want social media? So often when I talk to kids about this, it's really just that they want to be able to chat with their friends after school. And if that's the case, there are a lot of ways to achieve that without giving kids access to all of these apps. There's things like Kids Messenger, which is through Facebook, and it's a paired account with your child where you see exactly what they are saying. They message their friends through their parents' accounts, and there's a lot of oversight. So that's a really great place that I often recommend families start, right? If your kid just wants to talk to their friends, there are ways that we can do that. There are absolutely ways that we can do that before we give your kids access, unlimited, often access to social media, to their devices. So that's a piece of it too that I really encourage you to think through, is how can we be creative in helping them accomplish what it is they think that they need or what they're desiring. And often this comes up as well, is a lot of families have different rules, right? And I say this so often in working with this population. There's different rules in different families. And some parents will give their kids a phone very young and give them all the access to social media. And kids can sometimes feel left out because of that. They feel behind. And I think that that's always a challenge to navigate. And I think that that comes up. That's going to come up in so many different aspects of parenting, not just social media. It'll be a bit around curfews and, allowance and so many different things. And I think it's so important to hold firm on what is right for your family and not feel this, and I know it can feel very overwhelming, but this almost peer pressure from other parents to do what they're doing, and a lot of pressure from your kids as well. And so reminding your kids that these are the rules in our family. This is what we do in our family. Everyone has different rules. Every family operates a little bit differently, and holding true to what feels good to you, what feels right to you. And so let's talk through what some of those rules are that I often recommend for families. So the first one, as I said, is no devices in the bedroom. And I am very passionate about this rule. This, in my mind, is a non-negotiable. And something else related to this is when you are giving your kids access to social media or access to a device, I always recommend starting pretty strict and then loosening up over time when your child can prove to you that they can be safe online, that they understand the risks, they know when to come to you. Because it is a lot harder, and I've seen this a lot too, it's a lot harder to start very loose and then have to become strict over time. That often does not go well. And what I often recommend to families too, and this kind of goes in line with the family rules, is if your child wants access to, let's say, Snapchat, which I do not like Snapchat. I think if you're unfamiliar, I'll give a little quick overview. So Snapchat is an app where you can send photos, videos, and text that disappears after a certain period of time. So once it's viewed, essentially, it disappears shortly after that. And I think as adults, we can understand and we can envision how that may lead to some dangerous behaviors, right? And so, but regardless of the app, if your child wants access to a certain app, I always recommend to families, have your kid actually research that app. Have them, as funny as it sounds, come to you with a proposal about why they should be able to have access to a certain app. And really what I'm looking for in that proposal presentation is I want kids to be able to articulate what the risks are. I want them to know what to look out for, because if they know what those risks are and they know what to look out for, then you can have a plan. because chances are they will get a message at some point that makes them feel uncomfortable. They will be asked at some point for details about what school they go to or what house number is theirs and what is their next move when that happens. They need to go in to that when they receive a message like that or a request like that, they need to know what comes next. They need to know, I go talk to mom and dad when this happens. And a safety plan is so key, and that can only come from them actually understanding what those risks are. And then again, once you give them access, start pretty strict. Let them know what your expectations are after they tell you what all of the risks of this app is. And something else that I think is really important when we're talking about rules is for you to also make an account on that app. If your kid wants TikTok, you're getting TikTok too. It just makes it so much easier for you to actually have good conversations about the risks and the benefits of an app if you are on it as well. So I always recommend that parents do that. And some of the other rules that I suggest, so again, no devices in the bedroom. I think that's a really, really important one. Protects their sleep, which is so important. And, as I said, the ripple effects of that, the mental health effects of that are so important. And they really don't need to be talking to their friends at 2 a.m. They'll see them the next day. It's okay. So that's a big one. Time limits is another really important rule. A lot of kids, they don't have time limits, and it's a bit of a free-for-all. And that, as I said, it makes it harder if you become more strict because you're seeing, let's say you gave your kids unlimited access, and then you're realizing maybe that was a mistake, and I'm really seeing a lot of negative consequences of that. It's harder to pull that back. It's harder to say, okay, I know that you've had unlimited access, but now you only get 30 minutes a day. And if that's where you are, that's where you are. And have the battle because it's worth it, right? It's going to benefit them to actually have more rules in place when it comes to their devices. But if you're new to this, if your kids don't yet have social media or that much access to tech, start more strict and loosen up over time. And we see this in the research too, that kids actually really thrive in environments where there are rules. That is actually, it creates a lot of safety for kids when they know that there are rules in place. So it is really important. So starting with those time limits. And that can be, I've heard a whole spectrum of what families do in their homes when it comes to time limits. For some families, it's 30 minutes or so after homework is done, right? Or it's an hour on a Friday night or a couple hours on the weekend with no access during the week. So find what works for you and your family. Find that middle ground that feels really good.
Are you feeling burnt out and exhausted? See you and someone who has recovered from a few burnouts herself. And through sitting in circles with women over the last 8 years, I have some perspectives as to what personality traits and habits and thinking traps perpetuate and put us at higher risk of developing and ending up in burnout. So if you want to find out your burnout archetype quiz, are you a CEO? Are you a saboteur, a martyr, a rescuer, a zombie? Then head over to the show notes, click the free quiz, and find out what might be getting in your way. Also, learn strategies and things to consider to help you reclaim your energy and recover from burnout so that you can be blissed out in the world and doing things that make you happy. Enjoy.
When it comes to devices, something else to keep in mind when you're thinking about these time limits and how this will actually fit into your life is it's a big transition for kids to go from being on their device to transitioning to a different activity. So when kids are on their device, that's a really high stimulation state. They're being bombarded with lights and colors and fun, and everything is moving really quickly. It's very highly stimulatory for the brain. It's very exciting. And to transition from something that is very exciting into homework, which is not exciting at all, is really hard. It's really hard for kids. It's really hard for their nervous system to make that jump. And so what I recommend is structuring screen time strategically. So having screen time and then transitioning to homework is probably not the best idea. That's going to be a really, really challenging transition. There are some things, they're called bridging activities, that can really help with that transition. So to go from screens to no screens, things like going outside and playing in between, having a snack. All of these things, taking a bath or a shower, all of those can help your child to regulate their nervous system to make that transition from lots of excitement to quite boring, right? So again, the way that we structure that screen time is going to be important to support your child's nervous system, but also to support your sanity, right? So things to think about there. And then a few other things when it comes to rules, right? So maybe there are family pairing that you do, right? So you can pair your account with your child so you have a lot of oversight into what they're doing. There's ways there's Apple pairing, there's Google pairing. It's definitely something to look into. There's a lot that you can pair. So I always encourage parents to learn what that looks like on your device and what that looks like for the apps that your child wants to have so that you can see what feels good to you. And a piece of this as well that I wanted to mention is that every single social media app has a parent guide. So it's required for every app and they're great. They really talk through all of the risks of that platform. They talk about how you can help your child stay safe. They talk about the ways that you can pair your devices and how you can have more oversight into what they're doing. It teaches you how to turn off some features. So again, back to Snapchat, they have a terrible feature, in my opinion, that actually plots your child's location on a map. And so everyone that they are friends with on Snapchat can see their exact location. Obviously extremely dangerous and just, not a good feature, but it's something that you can disable on their account. And that also brings a really good conversation about who gets to be a friend on social media. And I really encourage you at some point to have this conversation with your child, maybe when they're giving you their presentation about the app that they would like to download. This is something that I spend a lot of time talking about, is who gets to be a friend on social media, because whoever they friend can see all of their content, can see, back to that example of the Snap map, can potentially see their exact location, right? So a lot of private personal details are shared often with people that are friends with your child on social media. And something that I hear from kids all the time is that they friend people that they don't necessarily know. So they friend what they call mutuals. So if one of their friends knows someone else from another school, they'll friend that person, right? And maybe they've never met that person before, but there's 6 degrees of separation, therefore they are friends. And while that's not necessarily a bad thing, we just also want to be very careful that that is actually a child that they are friending, that it's someone who has positive intentions, right? Like, we just want to get clear as a family about who gets to be a friend. Maybe it means I've had families say that their child is only allowed to friend someone that they've met, right? And they can verify is a child that goes to another school or whatever it is. So defining what that actually looks like is a very important conversation. And there's so many rules, so many potential rules when it comes to social media. And, I've shared a few here, but there are unlimited rules. And so it's really sitting down as a family and coming up with what feels good to you, what feels like rules that keeps everyone safe and helps you believe that your child is doing what they can or participating in social media in a way that feels responsible to you. So I hope that this helps to just give you a bit of a framework and spark some interest or curiosity or maybe urgency in having some of these conversations with your kids. I really do, in doing this work in over 100 schools, having these conversations, it is something that I really feel is so important. And a lot of us too, we didn't grow up with social media the way that kids are now growing up with social media. It's a very different landscape. And in many ways, the risks that we grew up with, or the risks that existed when these apps were in their infancy, very different now. It's very different now. So much has changed and expanded, and these social media apps are massive companies with billions of dollars of research behind them to figure out how to hook our brains and keep us scrolling and clicking and purchasing and all of the things. And so it's a really different landscape. There are a lot more risks now that we do need to be aware of to help kids navigate this in a way that is sustainable, in a way that supports their mental health and helps them achieve a sense of balance. And I've had these conversations, again, in so many schools, and I get to talk to a lot of kids about this too. And when I speak to high school students, especially those in grade 11, grade 12, a lot of them have actually shared with me that they feel very addicted to their devices and that they're getting to a stage, an age where their grades really matter and where they're really starting to think about what the future looks like for them. And they're finding it really hard to stay focused on their homework or study for the tests. They feel addicted to the pinging of their devices, checking their notifications, their likes, their comments, all of the things. And a lot of high school students, especially grade 11s and 12s, have told me that they wished they had had these conversations when they were younger, when they were getting started on these devices. They wish that they had known how it could impact their mental health. They wish they had known how to set time limits, or even many of them have said that they want help from their parents now to enforce these rules, to help them spend less time on their devices. So the kids are struggling, right? Especially the older teenagers who are realizing that their phone is getting in the way of the things that they now realize are important to them. So start these conversations young, let them evolve, right? The conversation that you have about social media now with your 10-year-old is going to be different than it is with your 12-year-old. But start those conversations, include them, right? Let them know that you're doing this for their good, for their best interest, so that you can help them to succeed online and have a positive relationship. So I hope that I've left you with some inspiration, maybe some urgency. And if you and your daughter are navigating some of these things, if she is likely to join social media or devices in the next couple years, or if she is on there already and is a pretty new user, then I'd love to have you to join us for our mom and daughter social media safety workshop. It's happening in September. So it's on September 19th in Burlington at the Poppy Clinic. So again, I'll put all the details in the show notes as well as the link to sign up. We only have a few spots left. We're already 50% sold out. So if these are the conversations that you want to be having, if you want your daughter to learn about some of these risks in a way that just helps to put it all into context. We're going to be talking about the tween brain and why social media feels hard to put down. We're going to talk about decision-making online, the pressure, comparison, her digital footprint. I have some really fun demos about that to really help drive that point home. We're going to go through some safety checklists, common apps that teenagers are using, what they need to be aware of. We're going to talk about how to recognize and respond to unsafe or uncomfortable situations. And then we're going to talk about a safety plan for these apps. We're going to talk about your family's rules. And the goal of this is just to really help the two of you connect on this topic and get on the same page, helping her to understand that social media is a responsibility and that using these apps is a privilege in a lot of ways and requires a lot of understanding and safety and being careful and good communication. so that she can develop a healthy relationship. So again, all of those details will be in the show notes. If you and your daughter would like to join us, then I would absolutely love to welcome you into our community. I hope that you enjoyed listening to this. I am wishing you a wonderful rest of your day. And until next time, stay wild.
Thank you so much for tuning in to Wild Medicine. I am so grateful to have you here, and I hope you're feeling inspired and empowered. If you enjoyed today's episode, please don't forget to subscribe and leave a 5-star rating. It helps us reach more incredible women just like you. And before you go, quick reminder, the information shared on this podcast is for educational purposes only and is not intended to diagnose or treat any medical condition. Please consult with your healthcare provider for personalized advice and care. And if you're ready to take inspired action and dive deeper into your own health journey, please visit us at poppyclinic.com. Let's rewild and reset your health together.